Hey guys, Tarke here, and I want to talk about what I think is going to be my League starter come 317, a Bleed Bow Deadeye, I think, over Gladiator, but I've managed to find bossing footage of both a Bleed Bow Glad and a Bleed Bow Deadeye. I will shout out both of the creators later on, so you can look at the two, compare, and then once I've shown some of that footage, I will go over my skill trees for both Gladiator and Deadeye, and hopefully this will be helpful for some of you guys, or be unhelpful because you'll be even more conflicted on what build you want to play. So first off, the main thing, they're doing this big focus on bows. If we use Citadel bows as an example, 44% more base damage. Pretty good. Not only have they increased the base damage of bows, they've also increased the flat rolls and the percent rolls they can roll, I believe. We've gotten more powerful quivers, just lots of support, and none of the Hydrosphere interactions, none of those nerfs affect us. It's just straight gravy, and these builds already functioned. Woohoo! So I'll start off with some Glad footage, because that is what most people are going to be aware of. Massive shout outs to Apaxus. Link to the channel will be down below. And then afterwards, I'll show you a Deadeye version. So the main appeal of these builds is their consistency. You get the dot playstyle, but without any of the shenanigans required. So if you're doing an Ignite build, you need to talk about LE overload uptime, and that can be kind of irritating. If you're doing a Chaos dot build, you have the whole Wither thing. And while there are some debuffs that you need to manage, more so in the Deadeye version, because they have the Rupture mechanic, which I'll explain later, consistency is the main thing. They're a dot build that just does the numbers it says it does. It's pretty hard to inflate. Now, a lot of people like to use the Snipe helmet, which is what both of these videos use, which is the Asilium helmet. But you can play without it. I'm planning to play without it, and I've also got a Pee-wee Ninja of someone who did a Bleed Gladiator to 100 in SSF, which I'll also talk later, and he didn't have it. So you've got lots of interesting gear scaling. The uniques that some people do consider mandatory, which aren't mandatory, we're talking stuff like the helmet, they're very cheap in Trade League. Obviously, I play SSF, but if you are a Trade League player, you can get the items pretty cheap, and this build should be pretty under the radar, because everyone's freaking out about explosive arrow ballista stuff. So, you should be gravy. Now, there are 3 ascendancies that I consider viable options for this build. You have Gladiator, you have Deadeye, and you have Scion. I've prepared trees for both Deadeye and Gladiator. The Scion is a weird one. It might be my favorite one, but I'm probably not going to play it. So the advantages of the Gladiator, as you can see here, is you've got the bleed explosions for map clear. You've got a whole bunch of things that scale your dot damage, which helps your single target. And generally, you can change your placement on the tree, but generally you have access to a lot of the very good armor nodes. You also have access to a lot of the maximum resistance nodes. And you can have the instant war cries on left click, which gives pretty tasty sustain. So, you know, you get some spell suppression. You convert all your evasion into armor. You get very high armor. You get some sustain from the war cry stuff. Seems pretty good. Pretty well-rounded character with some good single target potential. Okay, cool. How does that compare to the Deadeye? So the Deadeye has a lot more single target damage. Has the same like movement speed because you have the Tailwind scaling compared to the Charger scaling. You don't have the bleed explosions baseline, but you can get them from Hemophilia gloves if you do choose that you want them. And you have potentially significantly more one-shot protection, which is very important from bossing through the Wind Ward mechanic. So Inco, who I will leave a link to down below, massive shout out. Inco is also fun enough doing Iron Reflexes, armor scaling, and this number here is their like charges going up. And you'll see they nearly always have at least 3 or 4 charges without like any form of avoidance. So even if you only ever have 3 charges up at once, that's 9% damage mitigation. If you have all 10 charges, that's you can see how quickly that died. You know, that's up to 30% damage reduction, which is very, very silly. And you're like, okay, Tarke, but these are 2 like crazy min-max Trade League versions. You play SSF, let's bring it down a notch. Let's bring it down a notch. And this is where this guy comes in. So this guy played this build to 100 in SSF. I imported his setup into Path of Building, And his puncture did, drumroll please, 250k. Nothing, right? And you're like, that's 250k, you can't kill anything with that. Actually, yeah, so it's the whole thing with dot builds. Dot builds are really good for bossing, because you just put the dot on it, and you walk away, and you just focus on avoiding damage. And you've got good durations on them, you don't have too many debuffs to juggle, very consistent damage, unlike as earlier, you know, stuff like having to maintain wither uptime, or Elite Overload uptime, etc, etc, etc. So, this was the bow that the SSF guy was using, and this seems like a pretty good bow. It's got like decent rolls on there, it's multi-mod, it's got elder mods, it's got all this stuff. All of this dwarfs in comparison to just a base Citadel bow, essence on it, and with the new mods you just have more damage, and you can still get these like double dot multi things. It's great. Like likewise with the quivers and stuff, you can get double dot multi quivers. This is just a single dot multi quiver. If we look at what I have in my path of building, 930k dot damage, by the way. I've put in, there's a Citadel Harvey and a Spine, because I'm looking at crit values, because Rupture uses crit. And these seem like insane, like, oh, Tarke, tier 1 fizz rolls. These are like tier 2, tier 3 fizz rolls. Now, you can guarantee stuff using essences. These are going to be really easy to get now. Likewise with the quiver, we're getting these new quivers with crazy base damage rolls on there. The only other damage scaling I've got in my gear is I put flat fizz on gloves, flat fizz on rings, and that was it. Oh, we've got one dual roll. Like, this is actually really, really achievable. So let's get into some of the nitty-gritty mechanics on the Deadeye. Talk about some skill tree stuff, talk about some Gladiator stuff, and then the Scion, which I hinted at a few times. So, rupturing. Critical strikes which inflict bleeding also inflict rupture. Ruptured targets take 25% more damage from bleeding, and bleeding on them expires 25% more quickly for 3 seconds. That's how long rupture lasts, 3 seconds. Up to 3 ruptures can affect a target. So that's 75% more damage with bleeding. That one node alone is more dot damage than you get in like all of Glad. Just boom, just more damage. You then also get Focal Point, which gives you mark scaling. Poacher's Mark gives you cursed enemies have a lower fizz damage reduction, and flat fizz damage against cursed enemies, and Frenzy Charge generation. And it also gives you mana gain when hit by attacks, which means you don't need to worry about mana sustain that much, which can sometimes be an issue on these builds. Depending on if you go like Cruelty or you go like Deadly Ailments, you can actually build some leech into them if you want, or you like have to sack loads of minus mana cost. But this is just a nice easy workaround, which means that mana isn't going to be much of an issue to worry about in this build. Great. I think Gathering Winds is much easier to maintain compared to Arena charges on single target, because again, I'm planning this with bossing in mind. So to maintain the Challenger charges on single target, 25% chance to gain a charge when you hit a rare or unique enemy while in blood stance. So then you need to be running, you know, stances. You don't have to worry about the stances at all if you're doing the Deadeye or the Scion version. You get 100% spell suppression very easily. We have 69% just on gear. We haven't got any spell suppression here. So you get all the spell suppression mitigation. You get the wind ward mitigation. If there are any adds in the boss fights, we get 25% mitigation from them. This is also a really nice ability while mapping. I don't know. I think this Deadeye version is going to be pretty neat. The other thing which is kind of cool about doing this as a Deadeye is if you look at this skill tree, if I decide I don't want to do this, it's very easy to turn this into something else. I'm a Deadeye already. If I want to do like a traditional hit bow build, this tree is pretty similar to a lot of poison builds I was planning out. Very easy to swap if for whatever reason you do decide that you want to swap into something else. So let's talk a little bit about the Scion. Now, I haven't actually planned a Scion tree out yet because I'm not sure if I want to do it, and if I do it, how exactly I want to do it. The main thing that I was thinking about when it came to what do I want to league start in 3.17 was, are they going to nerf flasks? There's a modifier on flasks which is gain a charge when you're hit, which is absolutely broken if you use it with either Pathfinder directly or Scion Pathfinder. Recover % of life when you use a flask. So you stack all the flask charge generation you can get on the tree and on gear. Stage 1. Stage 2, you play an Ascendancy which gains Flask charges every second. Stage 3, play an armor build so you don't have any evasion messing you up. Stage 4, roll all of your Flasks with gain a charge when you're hit. Stage 5, use your Flask charges when you use your Flask when you hit max charges. You just get like automated healing, automated 100% uptime, really, really good, really tasty, and you can still get some nice little fizz damage on there from the Gladiator. It just kind of works. It just kind of works. Scion's a bit of a pain to level. That's the main thing that's really putting me off it. And this whole thing is a little bit gimmicky, and to get it to work, you need the whole Flask setup. And I think this is something more like a second build, or like, fine if you're doing a trade league, but for SSF, it's more of a second build. So, this is what the tree would kind of look like if you were doing this as a Deadeye. This is what it would kind of look like if you're doing this as a Glad. Then the Glad gets a few kind of neat tricks going on. These values are slightly off because I haven't like changed all the auras up. These are the auras that you'd use if you were playing a Deadeye. But the main thing, if you're doing this as a Glad, you're going Iron Reflexes, you're getting Stun Immune from Unwavering Stance. You stack a whole bunch of like maximum resistances, which is pretty cool. You get the War Cries on left click, which is giving you a bit of extra sustain. That's one thing the Glad has over the Deadeye. It's got that sustain, which is quite good. And then this is something which not many people use at all. Defend with 120% of armor while not on low energy shield. If you have 0 energy shield, you just gain 20% more armor. Pretty good, that. You also get the reduced damage reduction from crits. Reduced damage from crits. So I had that on somewhere else somewhere. There you go. So you also get a little bit of curse map. So like, you know, this is the Glad version is by no means bad. The Glad version is very much like the safe option, because it's one of those things of you don't need to worry about anything. Like if you don't want to think like I just want to play a bleed build, do the Glad. Like I'm not going to say that the Deadeye's better. I think the Deadeye's going to be more interesting. It's a bit more niche. No one really plays it. And I personally have just never played a Ruptured Deadeye. So for that alone, I think it's worth me playing it. Then adding on the fact I think it's going to be better for bossing. It's going to be more one-shot protection for bossing. It just seems like the obvious play. One final thing, which might seem like a minor point, but it's quite big in SSF, that the Deadeye has over the Gladiator. If you look at the stat requirements, I'm only getting a little bit of dex with this rooting here. Very, very little bit of dex. Compare that to the Deadeye, we get loads of dex just off the tree, which means that we don't need to worry too much about stat requirements. It's pretty comfy. You just need to get maybe a little bit of strength, maybe just like a little bit of int, and boom. Having to maybe de-level some utility gems is much better than not being able to equip the bow, which is the main source of all of your damage. That's slightly important. Also, this gets a lot of spell suppression just on the tree. We've got 69% spell suppression on the tree, meaning we need to get 31% on gear, compared to the Glad, which has to get like everything from gear. So again, it's just like the Deadeye's just softer from a gearing point of view. The only thing, yeah, is the Ungle's Harmony, but it's such a common item. It's really like no stress at all there. So yeah, it seems like a pretty neat build. Seems pretty under the radar. Is there anything else to really talk about? I guess we could talk about like the gem setup a little bit. So for single target, Puncture obviously. Vicious Proj, Brutality, Deadly Ailments of Affliction. I might run Cruelty. If I run Cruelty, I don't know if I can get away with running Deadly Ailments. So I just need to play with it. Cruelty is more damage. You can see it's like an extra 50k damage, which, you know, it's quite a big difference. I'll see if I can make Cruelty work. I'm thinking of using Puncture for map clear instead of Split Arrow for map clear for a couple of reasons. So the Puncture map clear does more damage with both GMP and chain and links than the Split Arrow does. And also, I'm pretty sure the map clear Puncture on a 5 link with GMP and chain still does more bleed damage than the split. Yeah, it does. And keep in mind, my Split Arrow map clear on this setup is more Puncture damage than that Glad SSF one I showed. And this isn't with all the fancy new stuff. Like this should be good. This should work. This should be pretty tasty. Should be pretty tasty. So yeah, so there's that going for it. So it gets more damage. The other thing which is kind of cool about the Puncture is puncture just causes bleeding. There's none of this like chance to bleed thing. Getting 100% chance to bleed can be kind of irritating. This is one of the things which irritates me about the changes they've done to Ignite, because it's like if you want 100% chance to Ignite, you have to play an Elementalist, or you need to stack loads of it on the tree, or stack loads of it on gear. With Puncture, you just bleed. So anything which is like, oh, a chance to avoid bleeds, nah, because it just guarantee bleeds on hit. Pretty good. Also extra important when you're messing around with the Rupture, because like you need to crit and you need to bleed. So as soon as you start messing around with chance to bleed, if you're not 100%, you start getting some inconsistency creeping in there. And if you use a Diamond Flask, you got up to 73% crit chance. Probably going to use a Harbinger Bow over a Citadel. The Fizz roll isn't much, and you're getting an extra 1.5% base crit, which is pretty good. If I feel like the Rupturing isn't consistent enough, I'd maybe mess around with using maybe some sort of like Mirage, Archer, Barrage, crit setup, like Puncture, Crit Strikes, Mirage, Archer, Barrage. I can also have my Ensnaring Arrow. If my Ensnaring Arrow crits and applies bleeds, then that also stacks up Rupture charges. There's lots of different shenanigans, so I don't think I need to really worry about the Rupture things. And also, even if I only ever have one Rupture stack up, the one Rupture is still more damage than the Glad. So even if I only have one up, it's fine. So like, yeah, the Deadeye is just more deeps. It's just more deeps. It just is. So yeah, I think I'm going for it. I think I'm pretty locked in at this point. If you have any experience playing this build, be it Gladiator, Scion, or Deadeye in recent leagues, please let me know. If you've got any advice, if you think I've missed any tricks, let me know. And yeah, what are you thinking for your league start stuff? And finally, massive shout out, check them out. I'll leave links down below to Inco and Apaxus. So yes, I'm Tarke. Have a good day. Bye-bye.